So, around about 6 months ago, I released a inbox review of the Italeri 1/72nd scale ME410, and a few months later I did a build video on it. And originally I'd really wanted to get the Airfix one and compare them at the same time. So I'd ordered a Airfix one from my local hobby shop when they sort of just started to arrive in Australia, the first lot, which was mainly pre-orders, so I wasn't really expecting to get it on the first delivery. However, it then took 7 months for it to finally arrive, but it is in fact here. The Airfix 1/72nd scale Messerschmitt ME410. So I'm a little bit late to the party. Most people have already done an inbox review and built this kit and said what needs to be said, but I thought maybe some people might still want to have a watch of an inbox review. So without further ado, let's get into it. So starting out with the box art, as you can see we have a very beautiful rendering of a ME410 with the smaller 20mm cannon sticking out bottom there, flying over the Norwegian fjords. Looks quite pretty. There's a little bit of snow and you can see a little road and all the rivers down there, and the aircraft looks quite nice. A little few bits of weathering here and there, but nothing too crazy. Looks pretty good. Then we've just got the titles on the bottom there and the different variants. So you have the A1, which is the attacker version pretty much, U2 and U4, which are the field kits, and one of these is for the large 50mm cannon, I believe. Then on the top here we have a brief history about the ME410 and about how it sort of evolved from the ME210 after they found out that the wing design was terrible on it. And then we have the schemes included in the kit. So we've got one from Zestrøya 26 from Norway 1945, and I apologise for all the German that I'm butchering here. And we have another one from Zestrøya 26 from Königsberg in 1944, so I believe that's in Germany, and then as I've said, this one's from Norway. Then we've got the usual Humbrol colours, pretty much the same colours required for both schemes, and of course a mention that glue and paints are not included. You have 2 Airfix flying hours, which I believe can be exchanged as part of their flying club program. Unfortunately, in Australia, it doesn't really make sense because you have to pay for postage, which is bloody expensive from Airfix directly. So being a part of the Airfix club, I don't think can really be justified unless you buy like 100 Airfix kits a year, which as good as they are, I probably wouldn't. And we have a skill level 2, so yeah, according to Airfix, they'd say it's, need a little bit of skill to do it, but it's obviously not impossibly hard. Backside of the box is white. Underside just has all of the usual warnings about not eating the kit and all of that sort of stuff. On the side of the box here, we have a repeat of the artwork, and it's the same ordeal on the other side there. So that's pretty much the box out of the way. We'll open it up and have a little look at the instructions. So in the box we have 2 pieces of paper for our instructions and then a second one for our marking guide. We then have a plastic bag which contains all of our sprues, plus another bag inside of that for the clear parts to keep them nice and protected and prevent them from getting scratched. And finally we have our decals, which also have a little sheet of paper to sort of protect them again from getting damaged. So we'll start off by having a look at the instructions and seeing how this kit kind of goes together. On the front of the instructions we have a bit more of a in-depth description of the ME410. This one also mentions the BF110, about how the 210 kind of evolved to replace it and turned out to be a total failure. Then we've got some basic specifications for the aircraft, including its maximum speed at sea level, its range in both miles and kilometers, wingspan, length, and we've got the armament, so the 2 7.92 MG17 machine guns in the nose, plus the 2 MG151s, which are 20 mils, and up to 1,000 kilograms of bombs. Opening it up, you have the assembly instructions and a little bit of a basic kind of guide for getting started if you're a bit newer with these kind of verbal instructions. Then we've got our icons here which show the various things you might have to do to make this kit. And then over the page here we have our first stages of assembly, beginning here with the cockpit. So you've got painting the colours for the floor, and I like that they've done a little bit of colour with this kit. You can see they've got for the 79, which I suppose is like the grey in the cockpit, they've done it a little bit darker. The black you can see for the instrument panels is there, and then they've done a slightly lighter colour for the rudder pedals, which I suppose would be something similar to silver. So yeah, it's I don't know if it's fully color, but it is. They've sort of tried to highlight the different color areas. Plus, they've got the very clear, visible colors in Humbrol numbers there for where to paint. Then we've got some decals here for the side details, although I'd honestly be tempted to just dry brush some of those details because it looks like there's some raised stuff, but we'll have a look at the parts a little bit later. But basically you've got the main cockpit floor there, plus another floor section here with the cannons, and a little clear window that fits in underneath the rudder pedals. Optional step here for scheme number B by the looks of things, or letter B, where you have to drill out a hole, possibly for the cannon barrel, I believe, but we'll have a look and see where that comes into play later on. But yeah, a little bit fiddly there. Then we've got a separate part here for the seats with the strange kind of leg rests that are featured on the 410. Plus you've got the headrest there for the pilot. Again, you've got to paint those ones before sticking them in. Then you've got the instrument panel, or there's like a little panel at the bottom there, I believe, for your engine temperatures and that sort of thing, that goes on the floor there. Then you've got a nice detailed looking control column that goes between the pilot's legs there. We've got a bulkhead for behind the pilot section leading into the rear gunner position. Then we've got, looks like the start of the rear gunner's station being built here. So we've got the upper kind of floor, I suppose. Looks like we've got a little bit of detailed parts to put in here and like a sort of armoured shield. Then turning over the page, we're attaching that to the back of the cockpit there. Looks like it might be a little bit of a fiddly step, but if you line these up, they look like they're keyed, so hopefully they go well together. Looks like on the underside here, we've got a little bit of internal bomb bay detailing. And here we've got, for scheme B, it's the piece that we drilled out those holes for. Looks like some sort of holding device, perhaps for the cannon. Internal bomb bay detailing there with some nice looking wiring that you have to paint up. A little bit of yellow and a bit of black involved there by the looks of things. Plus you've got your usual 20mm cannons. So I believe they're present on both aircraft. Then on the underside of the wings here, we're skipping along. We've got a few things to drill out there if you want the drop tanks on the wings. And after we've drilled out those holes or whatever we want to do with the underside of the wings, we've got a little bulkhead piece here with, it looks like a little bit of the internal landing gear bay bulkheads there, and it's also got a little bit of the wing spar, so that's probably more structural, but you're gluing that to the middle of the wings there. Then we've got the rear gunner's compartment, so we've got a little bit of a floor there, a wall there with all the radio equipment that he would use, and you've got his seat. So you attach all of those together, and then it looks like you attach them to these three little holes here on the wings there. So yeah, it looks like that's why you've got to obviously do the wing assembly at this stage before you do that. Next we've got, looks like the landing gear bay. Next we've got some more assembly for the inside of the wheel well there. Looks like it might be some sort of tank, possibly for oil or hydraulics. I'm not really too sure about the more finer details about the 410, but yeah, looks like there's a little bit of internal detailing there, which I'm not sure how much of that you'd ever see, but at least it's there. Then we're moving back into the cockpit, a little bit all over the place. Looks like we've got the fuse boxes and all of those details as a separate piece, which gets attached to the side walls. Plus we've got the left side or right side instrument details with some decals to add onto the instrument panel there. Looks like we've got some nice raised details with all the wiring and ribbing on the inside of the cockpit there, which looks pretty good. We've also got back here a little bit of detailing on the inside of the tail wheel compartment, and you've got a little bulkhead that you have to put into place. On the other side of the cockpit, we've got a second instrument panel. The 410's got a bit of a weird instrument panel. It's sort of got two sections on either side. So yeah, they've done it as separate pieces by the looks of things. And yeah, more raised details on this side. Looks pretty good. Then we're installing the main cockpit assembly here with the forward cockpit section and a little bit of the rear. Looks like it might be a bit tricky to line that all up, but it looks like they've done a few little guide areas, and yeah, I like that they've clearly shown where all the parts should fit when they're installed. You've sort of got the red parts indicating what they look like once they've been put into place. So I think that's pretty good, very nice and easy to follow and understand. Oh, and it seems, I've missed this little bit, but for these parts here, that's only if the landing gear is in the down position, which I suppose makes sense. Why would you bother putting all those parts into the wheel well if you're going to seal them up and never see them anyways? But yeah, that's pretty much it up to step 15. Turning over the page, we've got some larger steps going on here. We've got the joining of the fuselage halves, plus we've got a rather strange looking insert here for the turret system, obviously. Not too sure how it works, might be a little bit more clear when I'm actually building the kit, but I assume given that there's a do not glue symbol here, that if you put this in correctly, it'll act as some sort of base for the turrets to rotate off of, so you can freely move them. Then we're joining the fuselage halves to the lower wing section there, followed by the upper wings, so pretty common steps there. Hopefully everything lines up. There looks like a lot of little components to get right, but I'm sure knowing Airfix, it's pretty well engineered and it'll all go together quite smoothly. Turning over the page here, we have some small control surfaces being assembled here. You've got the elevator, which interestingly, the horizontal stabilizer, I should say, interestingly, they've molded the elevator to the lower side of the horizontal stabilizer, but you still have a separate piece for the upper side. Not sure what advantages that would offer, because it seems to me that you've already kind of got two sides that have got molded detail, but for whatever reason they've done it like that, so you have to line those parts up and join them. For the wings, you have the slats, which are pretty famous on Messerschmitt aircraft. This was a point a lot of people made about the Italeri kit, was that you could not have these slats in the down position, and when the aircraft is not in flight and there's no airflow over the wings, or if it's stalling, obviously, the slats pop out. So most 410s on the ground have the slats extended, is what a lot of people were pointing out. So it's cool that you have the option to have them extended if it's on the ground, or if you're doing it in a stall, perhaps, in a flying stall. Or you can put them retracted if you've got the aircraft flying as normal. So yeah, it's some nice options there. Looks like, we've got another option here for the elevator to be in the down position. So I'm guessing that's why they've bothered doing it. I don't know why they haven't done the elevator as a separate part, so you can't move it to whatever position you want, rather than having it either in the full down or the neutral position. I'm guessing the full down position would be good if you've got an aircraft on the ground that's been left there, because usually the stick will come back because of the weight, so the controls will be down. And then if it's in flight, you'd probably want them neutral unless you're doing some maneuvers. So yeah, a bit of an odd choice there. I'd probably prefer it if they did a separate elevator like what I've done with other kits, but for whatever reason they've done it like that. Then we've got the rudder, which I'm assuming you could pose in any position, although it does look like the joining point there is quite large, so it might not be the correct angle. But I'm assuming you can pose the rudder how you please. But otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much it for those steps. Moving on, we've got, looks like the engine nacelles, so joining the halves for those together. Plus we've got a little insert for the radiator flap, and the radiator itself goes on top of that. Pretty simple step for the engine cowlings there. You can then join them to the wings there, and looks like they're keyed pretty nicely for each side, so you shouldn't mix them up. We have some options for either Scheme A or Scheme B in the form of armament. You've either got for A, the 20mm cannon pods mounted inside of the bomb bay, or you've got the much more exciting 50mm anti-aircraft cannon, which is for Scheme B. So once we've got our armament in place, we then have some rather fiddly radiators on the wings to assemble. Looks like you've got options to have them either closed or opened. And it says for the aircraft with the radiator flaps closed, follow steps 31 to 38 and miss out steps 39 to 46. And then for them open, you have steps 31 to 38 and then carry on from step 39. So I'm hoping it's a little bit more clear on the page like they've done previously with the landing gear stuff, where it shows a picture of the aircraft with the different options. But it should be relatively obvious to follow. But looks like we've got some nice detailed radiators for inside of the radiator system, attaching them to a base piece and then repeating that for the other side. Then we've got some side pieces here, so yeah, pretty much adding those walls into place. Here with step 37 we have the radiator flaps, and it looks like these ones would stay fixed because they're on the upper surface, so you attach those to the wings. Then you can either install the radiator flap in the open or closed position. So it says 31 to 38, so I'm assuming that's normal for the closed ones. And for the open flaps, you skip 31 to 38, and here we go. So confusion aside, these are the closed flap assemblies. For the open flaps, instead you have a slightly different base piece, but otherwise the parts are pretty similar. And again, you install the upper flap there. Looks like it does open, so I was wrong there. So 10 degrees open by the looks of things, so you can install those and open them up, and then you'd put the open assembly onto those if you want your radiator flaps to be open. Probably more common for them to be open on the ground. I don't think there's too many phases of flight where you'd have them fully opened. Usually a little bit opened for less drag and still keeping some cooling going, but on the ground you need maximum cooling, so I'd say it's more appropriate for that to be when you're on the ground. Moving on, we have some individual ailerons with some nice large balancing cables, or balancing pieces there, I should say. I think there's a more technical term, but oh well. So you install those for both sides and then put them into place. Given that they're separate pieces, I'd imagine you could put the ailerons in whatever position you wanted if you wished. Then we've got the exhausts, which are attached onto the engine cowlings, followed by some fairings that go over the top of those. I think they kind of act as a heat shroud. I know on the 109s for the air intake for the supercharger, they're pretty much there to stop the heat from the exhaust getting in there and making it hot. Moving on, we have the rear turrets in their barbettes, which it looks like you have to only glue a certain part of the system on the inside there, plus you've got the machine guns. On the actual aircraft, these machine guns would be able to rotate outwards to give a wide firing arc, but on this kit, and on the Italeri kit as well, unfortunately they're fixed into position. But I suppose it makes sense. It's a pretty fiddly thing to try and get right, but you could probably glue them in an open position if you wanted to, or at a different firing position. It looks like you only have weighted tyres, which, yeah, I suppose that makes sense. Most people, if they're going to have the landing gear down, are going to model the aircraft on the ground. However, it would have been nice if you had the option to have them as not weighted, so if the aircraft was coming into land or something like that. But I'm sure if you wanted to, you could get another set of aftermarket wheels or something like that. But anyways, you've got two halves there for the wheels. Then you've got the main landing gear struts with a small piece getting added on there. And then you've got an extra little kind of attachment piece which fits behind the landing gear before you install them into place. Looks like it's going to be a little bit fiddly trying to get them into position, but I'm sure with a few tweezers and a bit of patience you can get them into place. Then we add the landing gear the wheels onto the landing gear. Plus we've got the flap that goes on the front there that's extended when the aircraft's landing gear is down. Over on the other side here we have the tail wheel. You've either got a closed fairing which you put over it, or if the landing gear is down you have a single piece here with a small kind of frame joining the two parts together. Hopefully that's relatively strong, but I'm sure it doesn't really matter too much either way. And then we are installing the tail wheel. Looks like there's a hole on the inside there to line it up with. Honestly, I think it'd probably be easier to install the tail wheel back before you join the fuselage halves if you're going to have to try and line up those pins on the inside. But I can also understand it makes it a bit easier to paint the aircraft without fragile things sticking out by putting it in later. Then we have our optional fuel tanks, pretty similar to the Italeri kit. You have two halves for the tank itself, plus you have these separate pieces here for the arms. They look like they're a little bit tougher and better designed to join to the fuel tank here than the Italeri ones were, so I'm sure they're going to be a bit tougher, which is good. Then you install them to the underside of the wings, and yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end here. We've got the propellers here, which looks like you can assemble them and still have them freely rotate if you don't glue them to this base piece here, and you install this sort of washer to keep them in place, which is good. I know a lot of people, when they airbrush their models, can put like a cocktail stick or something to hold the model on through the engine nacelles. And given the fact that you've got separate assemblies for the props, you can obviously do them separately, and then when you're done airbrushing, glue them into place and the props will still rotate, so that's good. Then we've got the sighting system and the turret controls for the rear gunner, which looks quite detailed there, and it's a separate piece for the hands control that he would hold to move the guns. Then on the nose here we have some windows for the pilot, and interestingly we have two different versions depending on whether or not you're using the 50mm or the 20mm. So obviously that small metal piece there has a slightly different hole for the guns to fit through. So yeah, using that according to whichever one you're building. Then we have the main canopy frame, and unlike the Italeri kit, they've done it in 3 pieces rather than just 2. So I think that should be better, although it's yeah, going to be a little bit fiddly, I reckon, gluing and painting those, so I can understand why some people would be a bit afraid of that in this kit. But honestly, I think if you have the right glue and you're nice and careful, it should be relatively easy to do. Then on the underside here, we have some rather large antennas. And this looks like a step, I believe. So yeah, if you've got the aircraft on the ground, you can have this step extended, or if you cut that piece off and then glue the small insert there, you can have it retracted for in-flight. Then we add the canopy frame to the fuselage of the aircraft and install that antenna there. Plus we've got a little pitot tube for the outside of the wing. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for assembly. So my impressions from having a look at the instructions is I think this is a relatively fiddly looking kit. I'm assuming, given that it's Airfix, that it's going to be engineered quite well. If it was a different brand of kit, I would be concerned looking at these, because there's, especially with things like the cockpit, there's a lot of really fiddly pieces and things that have to line up perfectly. And if you get something like that wrong, that can stuff the rest of the build up, because you'll join your fuselage halves and they won't fit perfectly because all of this internal stuff doesn't fit. I love all the options for the slats and the ailerons and the rudder, although the elevator, I don't know why they've done it that way. I think it would have been better if they just did it like they've always done and had two halves for the main part of the horizontal stabilizer and then a separate elevator so you can pose it however you want, rather than this weird thing of it's either in the neutral position or in the full down. Just gives a bit more option, really, and yeah, would save them having to mold this extra piece. Instead, they could have just done 3 pieces rather than having an extra one, making it 4. So yeah, a bit of an odd choice there, but it looks like it's pretty detailed, and yeah, like I keep saying, as long as it's precisely engineered, it should go together all right. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for beginners having a look at these instructions, and I'd say it probably should be more than a skill level 2, but that's just my opinion. For the markings, we have a separate sheet here printed in colour, which I think is a good choice. For Scheme A, we have, from Norway, we've got a rather interesting camouflage pattern here. We've got the regular RLM 74, 75 and 76 on the fuselage and the wings there, plus the usual German dreaded mottling on the tail there. But interestingly, we have a little bit of RLM 70 on the tail section here. As you can see, there's a few dark kind of streaks there and some interesting markings. Plus the props are RLM 70, which is pretty normal. Otherwise though, pretty standard looking aircraft. Same deal with the other side. It's standard RLM 74, 75 and 76 with the 3 colours. Plus a fair bit more modelling on this second scheme here, with modelling all along the tail and then along the fuselage sides. So if you want to avoid modelling, probably go with Scheme A, but if you're not too afraid of it, then you can always go with Scheme B, and you'll get that nice big 50mm cannon. So yeah, honestly, options are pretty narrow. They're pretty much identical looking aircraft, other than the armament and that little feature on the second aircraft. So yeah, nothing like the Italeri kit in terms of the options for markings, but that's alright. They're pretty decent choices, I reckon, still, and they reflect the aircraft service in the Western theatre pretty well. So that's the instructions and the painting guide out of the way. We'll have a look at the plastic parts and see how they look. As I've mentioned previously, all of the plastic parts come in a sealed bag, which I'll open up now. So we have 6 dark grey moulded plastic sprues plus the single clear one. I'll put some of these aside. We might as well start off with sprue A. And I like on the newer Airfix sprues that they have a quite large letter here, which is very easy to spot. It would be nice if Airfix had some sprue maps included in the instructions, but it's not really a massive requirement. In general, they're pretty easy to follow. But yeah, starting off with this sprue, everything looks pretty good. I'm not seeing any flashes or really bad imperfections anywhere. And it looks like all of the ejector pin marks are put in spots that are pretty hard to spot. But we'll start off here in this corner with the fuselage half, and as you can see, in usual Airfix fashion, it's some very nice recessed details, which all look pretty appropriately scaled, plus some raised details here and there for other parts, like you've got some rivets here. Some nice jobs with those little access hatches and a few little raised parts here and there for, like, I think the control cables would come through some of those parts there. Looking pretty good. And we've got a nice hole drilled out there for the cannons that are included in the aircraft, or I think those might be the machine guns. Here we've got some parts for, I believe, the inside of the landing gear. And you can see they've done some pretty nice details. Some nice raised wiring and some little cylinders, possibly oxygen or maybe part of the landing gear system. Might have to get some good references out when I'm making the 410 because it looks like there's a lot of nice hidden details here and there. We've got the inside of the bomb bay by the looks of things with all of that wiring and that raised ribbing, which looks really cleanly done and is going to look great with a little bit of brush painting. Then we've got the upper part of the rear section of the cockpit with the framework and the area where the machine gun controls would go into place for the gunner. Looks pretty good there. Not too much detail on the inside of these parts because they wouldn't be visible, and I think that might possibly be visible. I think that might be part of the floor section of the cockpit, but yeah, there's a little bit of detail there which looks pretty nice. And all of the ejector pin marks are on the inside and not too big, so they're nice and out of the way. Here we've got the cockpit floor with some nice sidewalls. I might rotate that around. And as you can see, they've done some raised instrument details and a very nice job doing the rudder pedals and all of that. So that looks pretty good. We've got another little, possibly part of the landing gear bay system again, with some nice raised detailing on the inside, or possibly part of the cockpit floor. Then we've got the rear gunners' radio systems and all the electronics, and they've done a beautiful job there. They've got some really nice raised details on all of the radio stacks, and all of the wiring is molded in place, so that looks fantastic. Here we've got the landing gear, which looks pretty good, or the wheels I should say. Very nice raised detailing for all the wiring and recessed detailing for all of the details on the hubs there, looking pretty good. I don't think the 410 ever had much of a tyre tread pattern, which has not been done on this, which looks accurate in my opinion, but I could be wrong. Here we've got some of the, or the wing spar basically, with the inside of the landing gear bay visible with a few raised ribbing details and that sort of thing. Not too sure what this part is. I'm assuming it's part of the cockpit somehow. This looks like the turret rotating system that goes inside of the fuselage. I'm interested to see how it assembles. I couldn't really easily see in my head how it was going to look with the instructions, but I'm assuming when you're actually putting it in, it makes a bit more sense. Here we've got the fuel tanks, quite nicely detailed with some recessed panel lining and a little bit of a raised rib part there for some strength, which looks pretty good. On the upper side, we've got some raised fuel caps for filling them up, and some raised areas here for where the framework is, which looks fantastic. Here we've got some really nicely detailed cannons for inside of the bomb bay, which look pretty nice. They're not drilled out at the front there, and there is a bit of a seam line, if you can see, running along them, but that's easily enough fixed. Then we've got one of the engine cowlings, or a set of them, and as you can see, recessed panel lines, raised air intake there at the front there, and some nice raised hinges for where the cowlings would open up for maintenance. So they're looking pretty good, nicely moulded. And we've got finally the turret pieces here, which, recessed details, some nice little rivets and panel lines, looking pretty good. And there's, again, not too many imperfections or anything with this kit. On the inside of the fuselage half here, we have some very nice detailing for the cockpit. And you can see some guide marks for how to line up the interior details. Looks like a few little controls here raised for the pilot, and you've got some very nice raised wiring for the rear section, looking all pretty good and accurate. And we've got a little bit of raised detail in what will be barely visible for the tail wheel, but hey, at least it's there and it looks pretty decent. Moving on to Sprue B, as you can see, it's a much smaller number of parts on this one. It's mainly focused on the wings, plus we've got our different radiators here, either for the open or closed position, depending on the angle and the part number. As you can see, they've recessed panel lines for the radiators and some nice recessed riveting details, plus you've got some raised areas as well. On the inside, no real detail other than some guide pins to help line up what will be the internal details for the radiators. Then on the wings, again like the fuselage, it's all recessed details with a few little raised parts here and there where appropriate. Really nice job on all of the access hatches for the fuel tanks and the oil tanks and all of that, plus some nice raised structural parts here. Nice little bit of recessed detailing on the engine cowling part here, and you can see they've moulded the supercharger intake here to part of the wing. And we've got some parts here that are missing for the slats to fit into, and the ailerons at the back here, all looking pretty nice. On the underside wing here, there's a bit more riveting detail. I've noticed this seems to be quite a common thing with Messerschmitt aircraft kits. They usually do no rivets on the top and a lot of rivets on the underside. I think it's reasonably accurate, but personally I wouldn't have minded a few nice rivets on the upper surface, but oh well, I think they're a bit more prevalent on the underside. And there's a few access hatches and that sort of thing. So yeah, underside looks really quite nicely detailed, I reckon. And yeah, it doesn't appear to be too much flash or any imperfections on these parts. On the inside, all of the ejector pin marks are there, and they don't seem to be too big, so it shouldn't require much cleanup at all to fit together. And you can see there's a lot of holes and guide pins for the inside of the wings there to help add all those extra optional parts. We've also got a small hole here for the landing light on the inside of the wings. I'm not too sure what these are. I don't think there was an option to drill them out, but I'm assuming it's for some different versions of the aircraft. Knowing Airfix, we'll probably see some extra additions of this kit with some optional other parts, which will be exciting to see, I'm sure. But for this aircraft, I think it's just the drop tanks, and yeah, that's pretty much it for the Sprue B. On Sprue C here, again, it's not too many parts. It's just the other fuselage half, which looks pretty nice. On the inside, again, there's some very nice raised details for the cockpit, like all that ribbing. Looks like some various controls and a little bit of extra paneling and details. Plus we've got some of the throttle controls and the trim wheel there by the looks of things, which looks pretty excellent. Here we have our rather unusual elevators. We've got the one with the elevator in the fall down position, or one in the neutral position. Looking at them, they look like they're pretty nicely detailed. They've done recessed panel lines and some raised parts for the control linkages and the ribbing details for the elevator control surface itself. So yeah, it looks pretty good. I'm assuming they're not the same on the upper surface, as you can see. On the underside you have the access hatches there for the controls, but on the upper surface you don't, so you can't really have them in the full up position. Again, strange choice, but oh well, it looks like they've done a nice job doing it anyways. And for the rudder here, we have some very nice and subtle recessed sort of sags in the fabric texture, which look pretty good, and a nice little bit of raised detail here for the trim tab on that one. Props looking pretty good. They're nice and cleanly molded. There's no seam lines or anything, so they look very nice. And then for the engine nacelles with the other side here, you can see again recessed panel lines with some raised details for the intakes and the hinges for the maintenance doors. Next we have Sprue D. You can see we've got the pilot's instrument panels there, which are raised details by the looks of things. Here we've got the framework for the, I suppose it's like a roll cage behind the pilot. We've got some of the instruments that go on the floor of the cockpit. Looks like the control handle there for the machine guns. Here we have our two seats for the pilot with the unusual cushions for the seat for his legs. And then we've got the rear gunner's seat. Interestingly, there's a recessed circle in the middle of it, so not sure what that's about. I'm assuming it's not a mistake, given the rest of this kit is very nicely molded. And yeah, bit of an unusual thing, but oh well, might be part of the 410's strange features that it has. Here we have a rear plate for the pilot with a nicely done cushion for his head. Not too much detail on the rear of that, but that looks okay. Got a fuse box here by the looks of things, plus some extra controls for the rear gunner, which look very nicely done. They've sort of recessed some of the fuses in there, but they're raised buttons there, which, yeah, looks very nicely done. Hopefully it'll paint up quite good. A few other small bits and pieces here, all look quite finely molded, including the optic system, I believe, for the guns, or part of the control system for the rear guns. Control column looks good. Looks like we've got the foot or ladder for the side of the aircraft when it's on the ground. Yeah, it looks quite nice. A few more antennas and the more aerials. Some of them are looking a little bit on the thick side, but it is a bit tricky in 70-second scale to do some of these fine antennas, so I think it looks alright. Here we've got the doors for the tail wheel, which look pretty good. Plus we've got the tail wheel here itself, and I'll try and get it a bit closer because it's got a lot of detail on it. There's a very prominent tyre tread pattern on it, plus some very nice details for the hub. And then for the kind of suspension system, there's a lot of recessed and raised details. So yeah, that looks pretty nicely done. Got another small part here, no idea what it does. Here we have the oleo struts for the landing gear. Again, quite nicely detailed. They've sort of done a texture here for the, I think it was like a fabric covering for some of the wheel metal parts there. So yeah, looking pretty nicely done. There's a few little pins or ejector marks there that'll have to get cleaned up, but that's, yeah, nothing too unusual. Looks pretty good. More landing gear strut parts. Again, quite nicely molded. Not too sure what these parts are. I believe, oh, they're the landing gear doors, I'd say. So yeah, you've got one in either the open position with the extra length there to the attachment, or you have this one, which is just designed to sit inside of the nacelle there, for if the wheels are retracted. Here we have our machine guns. Look pretty detailed there. They've got some nice recessed patterning on the barrels there, and a nice little bit of texturing here where they attach to the turrets. Here we've got the attachment points for the fuel tanks, which look pretty nice and solid. Control balances for the ailerons, looking pretty good there. I like that they've given them quite large attachment points, so they'll be nice and solid and hard to break. Plus we've got pitot tube here, and looks like the antenna that goes on the underside of the fuselage. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So all of these small parts are very nicely detailed. There's a lot of very, very nicely done recessed and raised detailing. And I like that some of these more fragile parts are done more solidly. So yeah, looking pretty good on Sprue D. And here we have Sprue E, which contains our slats in either the open position or the closed position. Got the covers here for the spinners on the props, which look pretty nice. There's a little bit of recessed detailing on them, which yeah, looks quite accurate. Here we have our ailerons with the large attachment points here for the control balances, which look quite nice. There we've got the exhausts, which they haven't drilled them out, but that's not always possible at this scale. It's pretty fine, but you can always do that later on if you want. But yeah, they look pretty good. Looks like some of the parts for the propeller assembly so that it will spin. A few little landing gear flaps here and there, which all look quite nicely done. And yeah, there's not really any internal detailing for some of these flaps, but that's alright because you don't really see too much of it anyways, I think. Here we have the radiators, which are quite nicely done. They've done a mix of raised and recessed detailing there for the radiators themselves, which, yeah, look good. Here we have the smaller radiators for the engines, and they've got a bit of raised internal radiator detailing molded to them as well, which, yeah, doesn't look too bad. Then we've got the side parts here for the radiators. I believe that they're the same for the open or closed versions. And we've got the part of the radiator that attaches to the wings here, and you can see they've done some little circular joints there, so you can attach them in whatever position you want. And finally we've got some parts here for the base of the propeller, where you can see the 3 blades would line up, and then you'd attach the spinner on top. And then I think this is the part of the propeller that would attach to the engine nacelle. This is the only part I can see an imperfection on, and you can see there's a tiny bit of flashing, but that's easy enough to sand away. Otherwise, all of these parts are really quite nicely molded as well, so yeah, Sprue E is looking good. The final sprue that we have is probably for this particular rendition of this kit, and that is Sprue F, and it contains the optional armament for the bomb bay system. So you've got either these twin, I believe, 20mm cannons and their appropriate bomb bay that they'd fit into. And then you've got the nice, massive 50mm one here with its little guidance or attachment point for the inside of the bomb bay. The detail on them looks, especially for the 50mm, relatively basic on the inside. So I would say it would be better to have the fairing closed over the top of it. But I could be wrong, that could be accurate for it. I'll have to have a look when I'm properly assembling this kit. But yeah, the bomb bays look quite nice. They've got some very bulgy looks to them, especially the 50mm version. But they've done some nice recessed detailing for the doors themselves. And yeah, the cannon barrels look basic on the 20mm, but on the 50mm they've actually tried to do the holes there for the... I think it's mainly there for all of the exhausts from the firing of the gun to escape, and it probably also helps reduce some of that recoil on this aircraft. But yeah, looks quite nicely detailed. A shame that the barrel itself isn't drilled out, but you can always do that later. No real imperfections to speak of for these parts, so looking quite good. The final sprue that we have is the clear one here, which I will open up. In typical Airfix form, we have some absolutely fantastic looking clear parts. They're very nice and transparent, and as you can see, even in some of the more curved parts, the distortion on them is really good. Even these really difficult to get right side parts for the cockpit look pretty good. Definitely a massive step above the Italeri kit in terms of the quality of these clear parts. Yeah, they look absolutely fantastic, and all of the framework is raised, so I'll find that pretty easy to paint by hand, and you could also mask it quite easily, I reckon. So yeah, looking fantastic there. And yeah, we've got our nose parts here, which are done as a single piece rather than two with the Italeri kit. Possibly a little bit better on the Italeri one with that upper piece there because of that curve. I think it distorts it a little, but honestly, for the curves on this aircraft's canopies, these look fantastic, I reckon. Interestingly, we have two canopy frames. I don't recall seeing two options in the instructions, but I'll have to double check. But it looks like the only real difference is there's a small bulge in this part number 5 here, and it's not present in number 10. So a very small detail that they've obviously gone to. Someone who's a bit more of an expert on the finer points of the 410 might have to let me know what that is in the comments section, whether it is an extra intake for fresh air or if it's some sort of gun system. I'm not too sure. It might not be even used on this kit, but yeah, again, all these clear parts look absolutely fantastic and of very nice quality. And here we have our decals, and as you can see, the quality on them is absolutely fantastic, which is pretty normal with Airfix kits. You can read all of those fine details there. They're absolutely brilliantly done with the level of detail that they've gone to. All the colors look pretty good as well, and yeah, you've got some very nice ones for the cockpit there. All of your little oil and fuel indicators and your no walking lines. All the little warnings and maintenance instructions in German there, looking fantastic. You've got your little ZU for the hatches to show where they're marked. And you've got your little squadron symbol of the wooden shoes for, I believe that's the... and you've even got some nice looking spinners there. I don't usually use the decals included in German kits for the spirals, but I think I might be tempted to give it a go. All your other details, your little voltage symbol there for where you connect ground power, all your little individual numbers for the different frames on the aircraft to help with maintenance and I suppose scrapping as well, it probably helps. Yeah, they look really fantastic. I actually, in this entire kit, haven't seen any part that says that it was made by Cartograph, interestingly. I might double check the box quickly. As you can see on the box here, it is printed by Cartograph, so I was mistaken. These are definitely Cartograph decals, which are pretty normal for Airfix, and even some other brands are starting to use them as well, I've noticed. So yeah, being Cartograph decals, the name speaks for itself. They're going to be of fantastic quality, I reckon. So my impressions of this kit are that it definitely looks like it's a fantastic one. There's so many little details, and a lot of nice research has gone into it. I've seen a lot of Airfix's posts on this particular kit. The weight was pretty ridiculous, but that seems to be quite typical with Airfix and Australia. Usually, if you don't pre-order them as soon as they're kind of out, you have to wait a very long time before they ever get delivered. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate I had to wait 7 months, but I haven't been desperate. I've had a lot of other things to get done in the meantime. But compared to the Italeri kit, I think it's pretty obvious this is a much better kit. However, if you're after just a basic representation of the 410 and don't want to spend too much time and just want something basic to put together, I'd probably go with the Italeri one, especially if you're a beginner, because as detailed as this kit is, it does look incredibly fiddly to assemble, and there's a lot of interesting choices in terms of how Airfix have done it with this one. So yeah, I don't think this is a kit for the faint of heart, and I bought mine for around about $50 AUD, that's Australian, not American, so I wasn't quite ripped off. It is kind of expensive for something like this, I reckon, and I think you can get it cheaper on Amazon, but I kind of didn't want to go down that route. I wanted to still support the local hobby shops, especially after I'd ordered it. I didn't want to get to the end of the 7 months and say, sorry, I've got it somewhere else. So I hope you still enjoyed this video and got something out of it, even if it was a little bit later than I would have liked to have done. If you did enjoy it, of course, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And if you have any questions or any corrections about anything I've made a mistake on, leave it down in the comment section below. A big shout out, as always, to my wonderful patrons for helping me fund the buying of these kits and for keeping the channel going, and just in general to everyone for being amazing. There are a few other projects that are going to be worked on before this one, so yeah, don't expect a build video to be coming out too soon, but one day I'm sure I will eventually finish it. Until the next video, take care, and as always, model on.